God still has to come, because none of us can fulfill all these things. We can fulfill some of them. We can be good in some areas, but at the end of the day, we keep failing, and a lot of it is failing in our hearts and failing in our judgments and our own rules and so on and so forth. So let's go through some things in the Scriptures this morning. We're going to be going through 13 chapters. Are you ready? Everybody, you don't need lunch today, do you? 13 chapters. Are you ready? Thank you. I've got one. Yes. Well, don't worry. I'm not going to make you go through verse by verse for all 13 chapters, but I do want you to have your Bibles open, because we're going to be reading from a few spots in Nehemiah, and then we're going to read more extensively at the end of this scroll in chapter 13. But here's what I'm going to do. First, I want to give some props and let us know all the good things that Nehemiah did that we can look at, and we can look at his example, and we can try to be those things. But because he is not Jesus, he is just like you and me. He's going to do some good things, but he's also going to do some things that are not so good, and we want to learn from that too, and it's going to point us to Jesus as we end this morning. Let's start with what Nehemiah did right. Well, I'm just going to kind of storytell through the first until we start reading together in chapter 2. In chapter 1, we are introduced to this story, and it tells us that Nehemiah is still there in the Persian capital. He's in Susa, and he hears in verse 2 that there's a report about all the people back in Jerusalem. And he wants to know about them, and he hears that they're there, but they're still in, verse 3, great distress and reproach. And the wall of Jerusalem, it still hasn't been built. The temple has been repaired, but the wall is still in rubble. It's still burnt. The gates aren't there, and so enemies could come in at any time. And we see in verse 4, he hears that news, and it hits him right in the heart, and he sits down, and he weeps, and he mourns, and begins to fast and to pray. And then the rest of chapter 1 is his prayer to God. And to me, I look at this, and the first thing that we can see that he did good is he has genuine concern and care for God and for God's people. You can see that he wants to know, and he has sorrow in his heart.